Good morning, everyone. I'm actually recording as we're speaking. I saw there's already quite a few of you on there, so we might as well take advantage of the day. It's going to be a glorious day, and I couldn't be happier because we have one of our fellow Canadians here, Dr. Corrie Block. I don't know if you've had the chance to meet him, and I have, and he is a dynamo. So this is quite amazing. Dr. Corrie Block is a globally recognized business strategist, author, and speaker. You should take a look at some of his videos I have on YouTube personally, and it is amazing. Can you believe this? He has over 20 plus years of experience. You must have been like 3 years old at that time, but I'm but you know, who's counting? Maybe math is really good for me. Okay, but this experience has an over 100 plus companies across 100 plus companies across 30 countries. He's a professor of strategic management, holds a master's degrees in business and leadership, a UK PhD, a Swiss DBA, and a certification in artificial intelligence from MIT. That last bit actually really rocks me. So was the artificial intelligence certification, what is that one of your last little toys, or what was that, Corrie?
Yeah, it's postgraduate certification in business use case scenarios for artificial intelligence. So I've been getting into digital transformation over the last 10 years, and I just wanted, look, don't be impressed with all of my education. That's my hobby. I don't watch football. I don't collect classic cars. That's what I do for fun. I read and I write journal articles.
Well, I actually, sorry, but I can be impressed. Okay, sorry. You can't tell me what to, no, I'm just joking. I am actually very impressed because I love people that never stop learning. And that is actually part of the adaptability process that's so important in life in general. So, yeah. We're going to have a really amazing day. We actually, sorry it took so long for us to get online, but we were having way too much fun exchanging a couple of few stories. I'm going to let actually Corrie tell you, let's actually guess how many days he has not left your house. Okay, anybody say 10? There's a chat box. Okay, before I actually put the poll on, how many days do you think Corrie has not left his home? Okay, the first person to get this will be I'll be very surprised. So is anyone up there in that chat? Oh, we do. 28 days. Oh, we've got them. Let's see. Okay, good morning. We've got V says good morning. It sounds like. Okay, and 28 days. 28 days, is that how long you've been in the house, Corrie? 26 from Brian. Oh, not even close. I'm so sorry, Brian. Oh, sorry, I don't even know you, and I'm already making fun of you. Sorry about that, Brian. Okay. Come on, higher. Just get me one more, and then I'm going to let us go on to our actually thing. 50. Jennifer, you are the closest. Well, 42. Nope, you guys, you were close. Jennifer, you're the closest. Corrie, come on, tell us the actual number of days you haven't left the house.
Can you hear me? Am I unmuted yet?
I believe you. Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear. Go for it.
All right, brilliant. 57. Today is day 57.
Congratulations. I'm really proud of you because that is quite amazing. So you don't look like you've been 50 different days. No long beard, you don't look caveman at all. So maybe you can tell us how that you were able to do that. Oh, 57, Lance.
Yeah.
Lance said 57 is great. So there you go. All right. So now you guys obviously know that you can ask questions at any time, and we'll be checking in the chat box. If you don't mind, why Corrie gets into things, we're going to have just one icebreaker question so that we know who is lurking there in the background. So if Heba would be so kind, we've got Heba. Oh, there we go. And there's your question. Does a CEO's level of physical fitness have an impact on an organization's bottom line performance? Good. There you go. So Heba will give that to us. So why don't you tell us some more why you gave us that question, Corrie?
Yeah, actually, for me, it started a few years ago. I was the poster child for the chubby consultant. I was 115 kilograms and smart, right? Like I always felt like my strength was in here. And so I had completed 2 masters and my first PhD at that time already. And I thought I'm really clever up here, but I just couldn't get the discipline to change my body the way that I wanted to. And I thought, you know what? I'm the most disciplined person I know. How can I not fix this? And so eventually I ended up going to, I scienced it, basically. I just researched it, how to get the discipline to do the things that you didn't think that you could do or just couldn't do. And so I went to the gym, 21 days, no days off. I've included all of those stories. Maybe I'll tell you one of them later. But then I got into CrossFit and obstacle course racing. And during that time, I was also doing a lot of executive coaching. And I started to wonder, because my productivity level went up. And because of all of this, I just became more energetic. I could do more. I got just insane amounts of work done. And I could always work in a state of flow, but now it just seemed like I could turn it on and off a lot better. I would sleep a lot better. And whatever time I invested in fitness came back to me in productivity and new ideas and creativity and stuff. So then I got to thinking, I wonder if there's an impact on the bottom line that's measurable. And as it turns out, there's a lot of social scientists that have studied it. So I studied their work.
Oh my goodness. So is this why there's a Spartan CEO? Is there a Spartan CEO in every one of us? That's what I want to know.
Yes. So Spartan CEO came about because I started running Spartan races. Also, I'm a really big fan of the movie 300 and the character of Leonidas, who was the king of Sparta in 491 BCE. So the character of Leonidas, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie 300. He's a spectacular character, and he was played by Gerard Butler, who is just nothing but abs and steel during the movie, right? And he marches this tiny army of 300 Greeks against this massive army of 250,000 Persians, and stands them off for 2 or 3 days before he finally gets defeated, and it's a big battle. Now, the actual history of Leonidas is fantastic. He really was a tremendous character, and he was a king at a time when Greek was really poor. So one of the things that doesn't come out in the movie is the fact that he was at about the age of 60 when he led that battle. And the average lifespan of a male in Greece at that time was between 30 and 40.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you take the average lifespan of let's say a king in Europe now, it would be about 80 years old. Now you have to think about somebody who's not just 80 years old, but 120 years old, leading an army into an impossible battle. And it's that kind of, that strength of character, the fact that he was at the front of the battle himself, and the fact that he stood up to Xerxes and Demaratus, and that strength of character, physically, mentally, and organizationally. Organizationally, the fact that these 300 people followed him into an impossible battle. But it wasn't just the 300, because what the movie doesn't tell you is that there was 100 Boeotians and another 6,000 Athenians that came along with him. So he was able to work very well politically to build up the size of his team. Even though all of them were moving into an impossible situation, he was able to get their buy-in and to put on this epic fight that lasted another 2,000 years in stories.
Well, that is amazing. So that is something like maybe what some people are going through right now, because they seem like they're going or leaving. They're going into maybe an impossible battle situation. Yeah. And so maybe you can tell us some more about that. So I'm sorry, the poll might be up. Do you need the poll? Is it all? It might be ready.
Yeah, in just a minute. All of what you're going to hear today is based on my book, which is coming out. By the end of May, it should be available on Amazon. This is the proof copy. This is the only copy that exists. That's my author's proof.
Oh, can we touch Spartan? It? Everybody touch the screen. Okay.
Spartan CEO. Yeah, it's based on all of this research that I've been doing over the last number of years on the 6 pillars that I have found have made the most difference in the lives of the CEOs that I've been working with as an executive coach. And those pillars are fitness, discipline, connecting, rest, competition, and confidence. And those 6 pillars, more than anything else, have really set apart exceptional CEOs from average CEOs. And so I want to start with the first one, which is the first one that I started with when I did the research, was fitness. I wanted to know if fitness actually mattered on the bottom line of a company. And what does the poll say? 88%.
Oh, yeah, 88.
Yes. So you think that your CEO's level of physical fitness impacts the organization's bottom line? Doesn't matter how big the organization is? I agree with you. And the science does too. So let's just start right in. Do you want to learn the science of this?
Oh, I'll say yes for everybody. Yes. Well, actually, you guys can say yes too. You guys can chat it up. Go for it.
Yeah, sure. Am I able to share my screen? Can I do that?
You can do whatever. Yep, you can do whatever you want twice. There you go.
All right.
We've got a yes coming in here. Yes. Okay. Ali's saying yes. Okay. Ali's saying yes. We've got this. Okay. So.
All right. I'm going to share this. We're going to go to. All right. Can you all see this?
Yes, there is some handsome man, and it says at Dr. Corrie Block.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much. Yeah. So, as it turns out, CEO fitness really does have a significant impact on the bottom line of a company's performance. So we take these different kinds of CEOs, and what I really wanted to ask in the study was not just whether or not fitness matters, but what kind of fitness matters. And as it turns out, the kind of fitness that a CEO has matters tremendously, probably even more than whether or not a CEO is fit. It's the kind of fitness that they have. So what I did was I took 2 studies based on 4-hour activities, one on golf and the other one on running a marathon. And so these 2 different studies studied the same groups of CEOs. They studied the S&P 1500 during the periods of 2007 to 2011 to determine whether or not a CEO who could run a marathon performed differently on the bottom line of their company than a CEO who could play golf. So even though both are considered sports and both would be considered sportsmen, what was the difference? What actual difference did it make if a company was led by a CEO who ran rather than led by a CEO who played golf? And the difference was actually this much. So if the average market value to asset ratio was 1.7 to 1, I'll explain these numbers to you in a minute, okay? Running CEOs had an average market value to asset ratio of 2.5 to 1, and golfing CEOs averaged 1.53 to 1. So what that means in the real world is in 2007, a company that had an asset value on their balance sheet of $1 billion, okay? For example, any company in 2007 on the S&P 1500 that had a value on their asset sheet of $1 billion would have been, on average, worth $1.7 billion in market equity. But if that company happened to be led by a CEO who had run a marathon in the last year, that company's average market value was $2.5 billion, not 1.7. And if that company happened to be led by a CEO who was playing golf, that company's value would be $1.53 billion on average, not 1.7. So companies who are led by CEOs who play golf perform worse than the average in terms of return on assets and M&A valuation returns. And companies led by CEOs who run marathons perform much better. How much better? 57%. That's the actual number. The average impact of a CEO who runs over a CEO who plays golf is 57%.
That's unbelievable. 57%. Well,
Yeah,
very good. Yes. Lance said it was incredible too, Corrie.
The research is all documented in my book. Also, there's so much information here that I've put out over the last 2 years. It didn't all fit in the book. So what I've done is I've started to produce a series of courses, which I'm putting them up on Udemy. The first one is up now. So the course based on fitness, the impact of fitness, how to choose fitness, what kind of fitness matters, that's all up on Udemy now as a course under Spartan CEO, the Spartan CEO series, just so that I could provide all of the information. All of the original studies are there, all of the references are there, so anyone who wants to can go and see them. But this is part of what happened to me, the impact to me on my productivity in terms of my fitness, I became much better, much faster, much stronger because I started to pay attention to my physical well-being. And I think there's a lot of CEOs, there's a lot of business leaders out there that don't understand yet that executive search engines, executive search companies are paying attention to this now, because these numbers, not only are they real, but they are much more well-known than they used to be. So companies that are looking for people to fill their C-suites, yes, they will look at the education and experience in order to give you an interview, but your character and your fitness level will help to actually get you the job. So if you're looking for a step up in your executive career, maybe you should start with your waistline. That's the thesis of that chapter.
So it's not actually just obviously a question. We're not talking about the aesthetics of it. We're talking about the whole mind, body, and soul aspect, I would imagine, right?
Absolutely, so, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So for
that makes sense.
Okay. Executive fitness is physical, mental, and organizational. So it's your physical body, physical or personal, interpersonal, and organizational, and physical and mental at the same time. So fitness is here and fitness is here. We can't dualize between the mind and the body. The mind and the body are symbiotic. We have things like embodied cognition, where our body just remembers how to do things so that we don't have to be aware of doing them at all, like driving. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of driving somewhere and then suddenly waking up to realize that you've just driven a car for the last 20 minutes and have no memory of how you did that. Right? That's embodied cognition, and that's a main ingredient in flow, which I'll talk about in a few minutes.
Okay, great.
So the next major discipline, or the next major pillar that I wanted to discuss, was confidence. After you have, your base fitness, your mental and your physical fitness sort of working for you, then a lot of CEOs, so many of them, struggle with this area of confidence. And so I started to do research on confidence and figure out what actually it's made of, cognitively speaking and neurologically speaking. And as it turns out, confidence is a skill. It's not a talent. So if you've ever heard of somebody say, oh, I'm a generally confident person, that's actually not true. The truth is that there is no such thing as general confidence. Confidence is always context specific in a human being. And the only way that confidence is gained is by taking a risk with a chance of failure and succeeding. So for example, you might feel confident speaking in your native language and not confident speaking in a language you've only heard a couple of times or studied once or twice. You might feel confident playing one instrument, but just because you can play one instrument doesn't mean you're going to feel confident to play another. You might feel confident to play one sport, but if somebody gives you another sport to play, you might not feel confident. So confidence is always context specific. And anyone who says that they're confident in every circumstance is probably just arrogant. And this is how we measure it. So confidence as a skill is the ability to measure your ability in relation to your perception of your ability. So if we take what's actually, because you need more than confidence to get things done, right? Confidence doesn't get things done. To get things done, you actually need skills, ability, information, networks, relationships, stamina. There's a lot of different resources that leaders need in order to get something done. And confidence is only one ingredient. It's not the thing. And if all you have is confidence and you don't actually have the competencies and skills that you need in order to get something done, you're going to end up in arrogance. So this is how that's mapped out. We take the actual ability that you have as the baseline. That's your actual skills and ability. Now, most people, most of the time, have a positivity bias that keeps them just above that line. And the reason we have a positivity bias, that is that our perception of our own ability is a little bit bigger than our actual ability. And our reason for that is that 300,000 years of evolution has developed that positivity bias into a best practice. People who get things done tend to survive better. People who do things tend to have more resources, compete better on the planet. They build more, they gather more, they hunt more, they succeed more because they do more. And in order to do more and consistently build your ability, you have to have a little bit of that positivity bias. So confidence is that measurement of your actual ability in relation to your perception of your ability as just under or just over your actual ability. It's the accuracy that's involved. If you're not accurate in your assessment of your own ability, you will end up in one of the two traps. The first one, and probably the most common one among leaders, is arrogance. And that is when you judge your ability to be far higher than your actual ability. That's a big challenge for most leaders. And
that's quite scary.
Yeah, it is. It is, because the most scary thing about it is that the people who actually have those competencies that you think you have but you don't have, they notice. And that happens a lot in executive leadership. Executive leaders think they have the competencies to answer questions that are outside of their domain. They answer the questions and they look like idiots in front of all of their constituents, and their constituents don't say anything. They don't say, hey, excuse me, sir, you look like a fool, because it's not safe to do that. So you just simply look like a fool. And that's part of where executive coaching comes in, is to try to help people to assess what their actual ability is in relation to what their perceived ability is. The second trap that leaders fall into is cowardice. And that is when you don't judge your abilities as high enough. And I find this a lot in things like public speaking. There's a lot of, public speaking is the #1 human fear, more than snakes and spiders and heights, all of them. People are afraid of public speaking. So getting on stage in front of 1,000 people, it can be really nerve-wracking, even for people that have a lot of information and a lot of experience and a lot of competence, and who are maybe even skilled communicators one-on-one. For them to get up on a stage and present something in front of a crowd of 1,000 can be really nerve-wracking for them. And that's because they don't have the experience to judge correctly their ability to deliver that content, even though they are the subject matter expert in the room. And so I find a lot of experienced CEOs still struggle with public speaking because of this lack of confidence, and it's measured in cowardice. So again, your confidence is a skill that's based on risk, your ability to assess what kind of risks you can take and then succeed at those risks. That will build your level of confidence, because every time you succeed, you build confidence. Now, again, in that pattern, there's two traps you don't want to fall into. One is always failing, and the other is always succeeding. Always failing, obviously, for obvious reasons, I guess, is you just don't want to keep failing over and over again. That's not going to build your confidence. But if you're always succeeding, that means you're probably not building your confidence either, because you're not taking enough risk. If you're not taking enough risk, then you will succeed all of the time. And if you're always winning, you're just not trying. So you have to give yourself just enough risk that maybe 10 to 15% of the time you're failing. And that's a pretty good indicator that you're building a strong sense of confidence at a really good pace.
Oh, that's amazing. We actually do have a question here we have quite a few questions here. Maybe you can see them yourself, but I can tell you one of them.
Sure.
B is asking, is that to say that risk-averse people are less confident? And there's a second little part to that. And is positivity bias different between men and women?
I've actually not read any research studies that suggest there's a difference in positivity bias between men and women. That's a really interesting question, but I'm not going to make something up. I'm a scientist, first of all, so I don't know what the gender difference is on positivity bias between men and women. What was the first question? I'm
sorry. Is it to say that risk-averse people are less confident?
No, not necessarily. Risk-averse people can actually be more confident because they're risk-averse. Because they're risk-averse, they take fewer risks. Therefore, their perception of themselves is that they're succeeding all of the time, because they're only choosing activities and tasks that fit well within their experience limit. So if we think of ourselves as having 4 pieces of input in terms of confidence, that's internal and external experience and emotion. We have an internal emotional input in terms of confidence. How do I feel about doing something? We have an internal experiential input about confidence. What do I remember in the past? What have I done in the past that gives me a benchmark for deciding whether or not I can do this thing? We have external emotion. That's how do other people feel about me doing this thing or themselves having done this thing. And external experience is what other people have done this thing that I compare myself to. So people with a low risk aversion or people with high risk aversion and low risk tolerance, they tend to take on fewer things that require more of them than they know they can give. And so they end up accomplishing less. That doesn't mean they're less confident. That just means they're less productive.
Yeah, sometimes it's like not stepping out of your comfort zone, or
exactly right.
Or so yeah, which is like the layman's version of it. We do have one more.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Do you have a question?
Yeah, there's one more, and then we'll let you go on. Sorry about that, but these are actually amazing. It says, how can you identify your own ability? Like, this is from Ash Cash, okay?
Yep.
How can you, how can you measure it? Like, where am I? Am I actual ability? Am I perceived ability? Which direction? Cowardice or arrogance?
Right. Use the 4 pieces of input. Number 1 is emotional. How do you feel about it? If you feel strong, you feel weak, whatever. Then use your experience. What experience do you actually have? So for example, let's say you were asked to play a concert, piano concert, right? If you have no experience in playing piano, how much confidence are you going to have? Not much. You might feel really good about it, but that doesn't mean you have any skills or experience to lean on. Then for most, I find that the big pivotal factor is the external. Asking other people how they feel about you doing it, and asking other people who have done it how they felt about doing it. Or asking people who are like you how they would feel about doing it. Ask for that external pieces of input, because all of that will feed into your ability to judge based on what others have experienced and how they feel, how you benchmark against them. Don't always trust your internal emotion. If you always trust your internal emotion, you're going to avoid a lot of risks that you should be taking. And keep in mind that that's a best practice, right? In the amygdala of our brain, in the brainstem, right at the very bottom here, we have our fight, flight, and freeze response. And we end up making a lot of decisions before we're aware of them, because we make the decisions back here long before it gets up to the prefrontal cortex, where we're aware of the decision that we've made. And so we can actually become risk averse back here before we're aware that we've even avoided the risk. And so that your ability to test or to measure your own capabilities is not only context dependent, but you have to be taking risk in order to judge, because you have to be failing from time to time in order to know where your benchmark is. You can't be afraid to fail. That's probably the thesis of being able to figure out accurately what your ability is to try things that are just above your comfort level.
Oh, exactly. I always actually say to people, what do they say? That if you haven't failed this week or this month or this year, you haven't quite maybe done quite enough.
Yeah, look, one of my axioms is that winning and learning are the only outcomes. I talk about failure because everybody understands the word, but there's actually no such thing. There's only winning and learning, right? Yeah. So if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. That's the other one, right? So if you try something and you miss, then you'll learn from that where your actual ability is. Yes, it might cost you something, but every risk could. If it can't cost you anything, then it's not a risk, is it?
Oh, exactly. For me personally, there's no value behind that time. Oh, that's amazing. All right. I think we're okay with the questions right now. So what would be the next?
So the next pillar is discipline. Once we learn a little bit about confidence and how to curate our own sense of confidence and hack our brains into figuring out what we can and can't do, then we need the discipline to actually do what needs to be done. And discipline is this. It's the ability to choose what you do in spite of how you feel. Now, I know that everyone has had this experience of sitting on the couch, watching TV, when you get that nagging voice in your head saying, oh, I should really write that report. Or, oh, I really need to go to the gym. Okay? When you have those thoughts, do you know how long they last? Anyone know?
Let the audience guess. I need a guess. I'm going for 5 seconds.
How long does motivation last in the human brain?
Somebody else said 5 seconds. Thanks, Marina. I feel like just like you. This is great. Somebody else have another guess? I just went for 5 seconds. Marina and I are on the same gameplay here. Okay, depending on that. Well, I guess we've given up guessing. You come on, don't leave us in suspense.
It's between 5 and 40 seconds. So between 5 and 40 seconds, that's as much as the scientists have figured out so far. That's how long it lasts. So what happens is dopamine is produced in one area of your brain. It's produced here in the striatum and the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. I know one of my friends out there she's going to criticize my pronunciation of that, I'm sure of it, because she's much smarter than I am in this. But the striatum and the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, these are where you consume dopamine for the achievement and reward center of your brain. And what happens is you actually produce the dopamine just in the anticipation of achieving that reward, not for achieving it, but in the anticipation of achieving it. So your brain, what it does is it's waking you up to say, hey, listen, if you finish that report, you're going to get a hit of dopamine. Here it is, boom. You know, and it kind of teases you with that. Or it says, if you go to the gym, you're going to feel really good about yourself. So why not just feel good about yourself right now? And it gives you a hit of dopamine. And dopamine is highly addictive, very pleasurable. It's like heroin level addictive. So you get addicted to that feeling of, oh yeah, I should go to the gym, or, oh man, I need to write that report. And it feels really good. But there's a second process that's going on in your brain, and that is back in the amygdala. And the amygdala is measuring the risk of everything that's associated with writing the report or going to the gym. So it's saying, hey, listen, maybe don't write the report right now because it'll take a long time. You might miss out on something important. If you write the report, you might make a mistake. You could lose your job. Then who's going to educate your kids? Who's going to feed your family? Or it might say, hey, don't go to the gym. You might hurt yourself. It's going to take a lot of energy. Plus, you're going to burn a lot of calories that the body needs to survive. So why would you go and do that? And then you have other activities in your brain, like a hijacking activity, that's a shortcutting activity in your brain that says, listen, if you want to hit a dopamine, you don't have to write the report. You don't have to go to the gym. You just have to eat a Big Mac, because it has a list of all of the sources of dopamine you've ever had in your entire life. And one of the greatest sources of dopamine you've ever had is a combination of sugar, fat, and salt all at the same time, which for me, that's a Big Mac. I've loved Big Macs my whole life, and they're a great source of dopamine. And so when I'm sitting on the couch and I have that, hey man, you should really get this book done thought, I know that right there, right behind it is this other nagging thing saying, hey, listen, if you need a hit of dopamine, don't get that thing done. Just go to McDonald's.
So Golden Arches wins again.
So our brains kind of work for us and against us in terms of motivation, which is why I say that motivation is really weak. It's a really weak force because we are motivated to do things, and then immediately we are motivated to not do those exact same things. We're rewarded by our brains for not doing them, and it's here in the anterior insula. In the anterior insula, we also consume dopamine, and that is the risk perception and emotion center of the brain. So what ends up happening is you become addicted to not feeling like it. You've ever had that sensation where you're sitting on the couch and you know you need to do something, and then if you just wait 40 seconds, it kind of burns down, and then you settle down on the couch and you get a second hit of dopamine because your brain is rewarding you for avoiding the risk associated with doing whatever it is that you wanted to do. So that again, 300,000 years of evolution have developed these incredible machines here that reward us for taking risk. And if we decide not to take the risk, it rewards us for avoiding the risk. So we get a dopamine hit either way. Now
that is difficult. Then how do you decide which hit to get?
Yep, exactly right. So the trick is what we call activation energy. I deal a lot with neurochemicals, and if you want to move neurochemicals from one area of the brain to the other, then you have to lower the activation energy that's required in order to get the thing started. So don't write the report, just go to the computer. Don't go to the gym, but change into your gym clothes. You know, when I started on my fitness journey, I knew all of the neuroscience of this. So I knew it took 21 days to build a good habit, right? 21 days, no days off. And that's how I did it. I changed just in one day from not having gone to the gym in 10 years to going 21 days, no days off. And the only way that I did it was by lowering the activation energy of the activity itself. So in the morning when my alarm would go off, it would say, hey, listen, it's time to hit the gym. And I would tell myself this story. You don't have to work out, but you do have to pack your bag. And I would say, well, I can pack my bag. That's easy. So then I would pack my bag and I would get a dopamine hit for doing it. But I would get the dopamine hit here in the front because I'd actually achieved something. And then I would tell myself the next story. The next story is you don't have to work out, but you do have to put your bag in the car. That's easy. So I would put my bag in the car. And then I would tell myself the next story. You don't have to work out, but you have to drive to the mall. If you go to the mall and you decide not to work out, there's a theater there, there's cafes, there's shopping, there's all sorts of things to do. So I'd say, okay, yeah, then I'd drive to the mall. But I would lower the activation energy and tell myself smaller and smaller stories to make sure that I could get over these tiny little hurdles by convincing myself that the risk was low. The risk of going to the gym, that's high. I might fail, I'll become a horrible sweaty mess and everybody's gonna laugh at me, and I can't lift anything and I'm not strong. So I would tell myself those stories. But if the story was just the next step, then that lowered the activation energy required in order for me to consume dopamine in this part of my brain where rather than this part of my brain. And that's how we can train our brains to overcome the weakness of motivation and turn that into the strength of discipline. We can use the addictive power of dopamine, just move the consumption from one area of the brain to the other. And that's what discipline is from a neurochemical perspective, is the movement of dopamine consumption from the back of your brain to the front of your brain.
Well, that's absolutely amazing. So it does make such good sense, because you're looking at it. If you take maybe things in bite-sized pieces, you know, it's not like you're trying to devour the whole thing together. The bite-sized pieces make it less overwhelming. And then if your body kicks in with little prize, I guess that's how you worked it out. So 21 days, eh?
21 days, no days off. That's how you build a habit. What happens is, over time, when I was telling myself those stories every day, after 3 or 4 days, look, I told myself those stories every day for 10 days, guaranteed, every day. But after 3 or 4 days, I would forget part of the story. So I would pack my bag and then automatically put it in the car. And I would skip a step, right? Because I was already looking for the pattern. I was already building a neurological pattern. And keep in mind that the patterns that you build that govern your behavior, these are physical patterns. They're a set of neurons that are firing all at the same time and same strength. And the more they fire, the stronger they get. So the only way for you to change your behavior is to change the physiology of your brain. When the physiology of your brain changes, you have new neurons and you have existing neurons that are patterned in different ways or patterned in a new way, and suddenly they're firing. And when they fire, the more they fire together, they wire together, and they get stronger and stronger, and that's what builds a habit. And it takes about 21 days, no days off, to build that kind of a habit, especially when you're trying to train your brain to seek a source of dopamine that costs energy instead of giving energy. So I'm trying to seek dopamine from the experience of working out rather than the experience of eating a Big Mac. And my brain, from a evolutionary standpoint, would love the Big Mac because that adds calories instead of taking them away. So its preference is to take the easy route to dopamine rather than the hard route.
And did you use any other tools than just talking to yourself? Did you put a calendar up or any other visuals? Or
I had an alarm on my phone, and that was it.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah, an alarm on my phone and a story in my head, and that was all. But I had to argue myself into it. For 10 days, I told myself those stories and then the stories started to disappear a little bit. By 21 days, I was fully in. I lost 17 kilograms in the first 2 months, and it was amazing. That
is a dopamine right there.
Yeah, and then I've had these incredible experiences over the last number of years. I've been running obstacle course races, and one of the reasons why I called it Spartan CEO too is I love the Spartan race. So I ran, I think 5 years ago was my first Spartan sprint, and then I ran the Super, which is 15-kilometer off-road race. If you've not run an obstacle course race, you have to like carry buckets of rocks and run in soft sand and up and over mountains and over walls and climbing on things and throwing spears and all of that. But I ran a 5-kilometer race, then a 15-kilometer race, then a 23-kilometer race. And then a couple of years ago, I set myself up another goal, which was to run all 3 Spartan races in 2 days, which would have been 43 kilometers. And I did that by using these tiny little stories. You don't have to finish the race. You just have to run the next 100 meters. You don't have to finish the race. You just have to run to the next obstacle. That's it.
Exactly.
And it's breaking whatever needs to be done down into tiny, tiny little pieces so that you can use the strong part of your brain, which is your prefrontal cortex, to overcome the weak part of your brain, which is the amygdala, which is your risk aversion center.
Yeah, it's when I broke my leg, and I did the exact same thing because I run as well. And so what I did after I broke my leg and I could start walking, I walked to the first lamp post, and then I walked to the second lamp post, and then I ran to the first ramp. You just do whatever it takes. Well,
yep, that's exactly right. So breaking down something into very, very small stories, that will help you to reduce the activation energy in order to get the chemicals to flow in the right direction. Treat yourself like a human, okay? Humans, not resources. When we understand our brains and bodies, we understand evolutionary psychology. There's almost no limit to what we can do and what we can learn.
Gosh, you're making this sound so easy. I wish we, we're literally going to have you back. I think we're going to have to do also a course or something with you, maybe here with CBC, because you're making this sound like so logical, like, oh yes. And it probably is. It's taking science and making yourself like be a human.
Do you want to learn about another chemical?
I do. Oh my
right.
gosh, I like chemistry. Go.
Yeah, so my favorite chemical, and I think the most also the most profitable currency in business, is this one here. It's oxytocin. So for those of you who don't know, oxytocin is a chemical that's developed, it's produced and consumed in the brain, and it is how the brain measures trust and connecting with other humans. Now, keep in mind, we've been evolving for 300,000 years, and we know that living alone is suicidal, and being fully independent is it's not a way for humans to survive. Humans can't survive all by themselves. Our best practice for surviving is to partner with other humans to create small tribes and societies so that we can divide the labor of protection and provision and hunting and gathering and educating, and so that we can share those responsibilities together and share the resources together. So we've had to develop over these few 100,000 years mechanisms for figuring out who it is that we can trust. And the most powerful mechanism that we have is oxytocin. Oxytocin is the chemical that's released in women when they go into labor or when they breastfeed. It's also released into your brain within 1/5 of 1 second if you meet someone that you trust. So that's how fast you decide. It takes you that long, because we've had to, if somebody's coming at you with a knife or a spear or a gun, and you have to determine whether or not you trust them, you need a mechanism in your head that can make that decision before you do. So your amygdala makes that decision for you. If you feel that the person that's coming at you is a threat, you'll release cortisol into your brain. And if you feel that the person is not a threat, then you will release oxytocin into your brain. And oxytocin is trust among humans. The more oxytocin that we can produce and consume, the more we will feel connected with the people around us. And that's the same in leadership. So CEOs who are very effective at helping others around them to release oxytocin when they're in the room. There's real mechanisms for that. And that is by treating humans like humans, not resources. We release oxytocin in our heads when there are 5 major triggers for releasing oxytocin. One of them is words of encouragement. If somebody's saying something positive about you, either directly or indirectly, you get a hit of oxytocin for that. Helping behavior. If you witness somebody helping someone else, or you help someone else, helping behavior it feels good, but it's also addictive and it's contagious. So it's an interesting sociological fact that if a human sees a human helping another human, that first human has to help a different human in order to feel like they've paid back to society what they've witnessed in the other one. So helping behavior is addictive and contagious. Appropriate touch, and I say appropriate because we're all in business contexts, obviously. But yeah, a pat on the back or shoulder or handshake, which of course now with social distancing we can't do, but 300,000 years have led us to understand what appropriate touch is and how that produces oxytocin in our brains. Real gifts. And by real gifts, I mean not money. Money is a proxy. It is a placeholder for something of value. Remember, you're 300,000 years of evolution, right? We haven't had money for very long. Money is a new thing. What we have had for a long time is things of real value. So a tool, an experience, a property, something that someone can own for themselves, that's a real gift. Not a promissory note for someone else to provide that real gift in the future, which is money. And then quality time. We have this innate understanding that there's a limited amount of time in every human life. We don't know how many days we get, but we know that once we've spent them, they're gone. And so any part of someone's day that they spend with us, that's quality, that's meaningful, that's something. And so that's another great way of producing oxytocin in the minds of the people around you. The more oxytocin you can produce in the minds of the people on your team, the better that team will gel and collate and collaborate, the more helping behavior will be exhibited, and the more you can actually get done. And that's one of the secrets of great leaders, is that they know how to produce oxytocin in other people's heads.
Well, that's what I was thinking about it, because I always say, you know, it's like any of those, like, feed it forward, network it forward, share it forward.
Yep.
Anything that you can, and it actually feels really good. You know, it feels good as the person who actually is doing it as well.
Yep.
The encouraging that other person. You see that person you encourage light up. You see that person that you've helped. You've treated them like in a very human manner, where you might be teaching them a new application on a phone that they didn't quite get the first time, and making them realize that you don't know until you know, making them feel like they're not stupid, for lack of a better term, you know, being human.
I'll tell you a little story about appropriate touch, which I think is funny. I want you to put up the poll on how long you should maintain eye contact in order to build trust with someone. Put that up for now, and I'll tell you a story. Do you have that?
Have you got it? Okay,
I do not have it. I have 2 other questions, but people can write in the chat box how many.
That's okay, yeah. Have a quick guess in the chat box there. How many seconds do you need to maintain eye contact with someone in order to build trust? And I'll tell you a really quick story. Appropriate touch, okay? I'll tell you the end of the story from the beginning. At the end of this story, a person that I have met about 15 minutes prior has their foot on the top of my head. And that was appropriate touch.
Okay.
So about 3 years into running obstacle course races like the Spartan race and NAS Night Challenge and things like that, the Tough Mudder came to Dubai. And the very first Tough Mudder in the UAE was held here in Dubai. And I decided I was going to go and do it. Oh, it's an obstacle course race. It's 16 kilometers long. It'll be fun. So I get there not knowing anything about this particular race. It's just an OCR. And I get to the front and they say, okay, ready, 1, 2, 3, go. And everybody's going. And so I start running with everyone else. And about 5 kilometers in, I get to this one obstacle called the Block Ness Monster, where I jump into a pit of mud. And the mud is up to here. And then there's a block that's got a ledge here where I have to like grab onto it and pull myself up and get over it. The problem is that as soon as I reached up to grab the ledge and pull it, the block rotated. And it was this high. And it was rotating every time I'd pull on it. And so it was impossible, absolutely impossible for me to do this. Somebody was going to have to stop that block from rotating if I was going to get over it. And that meant that in order for me to move on to the next stage of the race, I had to make eye contact with someone. I was running alone. So I'm looking around and some other guy jumps into the pit of mud and he looks at me and I look at him. I'm like, okay, you go first. So I just stopped it and then he climbed on it, went over, and then he hung on the other side and pulled so that I could rotate over the top. And there was 3 of those and we got over them. And then what happened after that was very interesting sociologically. I didn't pay attention until after we were done, but I didn't keep running at my own pace. I ran with him. I ran at his pace. Now we were running together. We had met each other just a moment ago. I knew his name was Ahmed and that was it. And then we were running. And about 500 meters later, we come up to this other obstacle. And it's just me and Ahmed and a massive ramp. It's about 4.5, 5 meters tall. And it's very slippery. And the only way to get up it is to create a human ladder. And it would take probably 4 humans standing one on each other's shoulders, leaning against this ramp in order to build a ladder tall enough to get to the top. And so that's what we had to do. The problem was that there was only 2 of us. So we realized we needed to make eye contact. So both me and Ahmed were looking around for another group, and we found another team of 3 people that were running by themselves. We said, hey, do you want to work together? And they said, yeah. So they came over and I said, I'll go first. And I put my body onto the ramp and somebody stood on my hip and then on my shoulder and then on my head. And we built a human ladder to climb up, and everybody climbed up me, standing on my shoulders and standing on my head to get to the top. Then they turned around and I climbed up them in order to get to the top. And that was amazing because it really showed the power of oxytocin. Somebody stood on my hip, stood on my shoulder, and stood on my head. And that was appropriate touch for someone that I had just met a moment ago, whose name I never knew, still don't know, because of eye contact and the oxytocin that it produced. We trusted each other to do what needed to be done.
So that's amazing. So I guess the appropriate touch might depend on the situation. Let's put it that way.
It's
All
highly
right.
contextual.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's, yeah. Now that you've explained it, it does gel quite well. There for a second, I was going, okay.
How much eye contact do you need in order to build trust?
Well, we've got the numbers are 5, 15, 10, 2, 4, and 7, and 1 to 2, and 5, all in seconds.
Good.
Less than 10 seconds we've got. So go ahead.
Yeah, this has been studied a lot. And if you make contact between 1 and 2 seconds, then people will think that you're trying to avoid the relationship. So if you look and then look away, look and then look away, then people will think that you're trying to avoid the relationship and they won't trust you. You have to make contact for about 2 seconds, but you should not exceed 5 seconds. Okay, so after 5 seconds, then people start to wonder why you're making eye contact with them so long, especially if they don't know you very well. If you don't have an adequate amount of oxytocin in your head already, then a 6-second eye hold can be a little bit threatening. And if you hold your eye contact for more than 6 seconds, like into the 7 to 9 range, then it's either fight, flight, or another F. It's you want something that's bad. So it becomes, at 9 seconds, it becomes really threatening to people, especially strangers. So you should hold eye contact between 2 and 5 seconds if you didn't know that. For most people, it's normal, like it's instinctive. But yeah, some people can come off a little creepy by holding eye contact for 9 seconds. It's not normal. Yeah.
Okay, so what happens when you're in an elevator and so they're all looking at the ceiling?
Yep.
So there you go, something like that, right?
Yeah, look, don't avoid eye contact with people because that doesn't build trust. And don't maintain eye contact longer than 5 seconds because that deteriorates trust.
Yeah, I mean, I was using the elevator. Sometimes all you have to do is, if you're looking, and then say good morning.
Yep.
And therefore you're fine.
Exactly.
Well, that is absolutely amazing. You've found a way when you're up to your basically chest in mud to get a person to work together. Well, you both decided to work together.
Yeah.
And then the amazing part, which I really love, is that you found yourself at the same pace, like it was like a team. You created this team.
Yeah, well, we realized that this was not the kind of race that we could win alone, right? Whatever was going to be in front of me, I was going to need somebody else to do it. And I'd already spent the oxytocin building trust with this guy and these other people. So after we had finished that big ramp, do you think the 5 of us broke up? No, we didn't. We realized that at some point in this race, there's going to be another obstacle that's going to require 5 humans in order to accomplish it. So we're going to have to stay together because this was not the kind of race that we could win alone. And it's the same in business. We're operating in companies that are operating in games that we can't win by ourselves. We have to have other players on the team and we have to work well together in order to win. Now, every once in a while, you will get a Spartan racer that's on a Tough Mudder course in terms of business. Like, so I've actually been there on a Tough Mudder course, and during that ramp thing where people climbing up me, and seen a lone runner come up and run up our human ladder and then just tear off and keep going all by themselves. Now, that's totally inappropriate.
I was going to say, is there any bad words in your mind going on when that happens?
All of them. But these people are in life. They're in business. They're all the time. They step on people's heads. Literally speaking, in my case, most of the time, figuratively speaking, they step on other people in order to get forward, to get to where they're going. And yes, he finished first, but he finished alone, and he finished without honor and without respect. Now, there's a lot of times in life, you'll get Spartan runners on a Tough Mudder course that think they're running their own race. No one is running their own race. You're going to come in contact, whether you're isolated like me in my house or not, you're going to come in contact with maybe 30 or 40 people today. You're going to need the people that keep your Wi-Fi running, the people that keep the electricity on, the people that deliver your food, the people that manufactured the food that's being delivered to you, the people that built your house or your apartment building, the person that's processing your paycheck, the person that's processing your mail. Your extended community of people that you need in order to survive is massive. There is no such thing as a human who does it all by themselves. No one is self-made. Everyone is in community. So that's just to give you an understanding of the power of oxytocin and the necessity of oxytocin for survival. Anyone who says that they did it all alone is an absolute liar. There's no such thing as doing it all alone. Everyone has community. Everyone relies on the society in which they participate, and everyone is a participant. So those leaders who forget that they're in community and they step on other people's heads in order to get to where they want to go, they end up without respect because they've denied one of the cores of being human, and that is to partner well with people so that you can compete well together.
Yeah, I'm just wondering now too, what we are doing. I don't want to say we're trying. What we are actually doing with our CBC webinars, both the Phoenix series and both the Industry Breakfast series, is we're closing the social distancing gap.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what we're doing. We're trying, and we are succeeding, which I'm very, very proud of because of all the hard work of the people behind it, of volunteers like you saying, yes, Diana, I'd love to come speak. Yes, I'd like to share. And when you have like myself and Heba and Sangeeta in the background, me less in the background, but so what we're always trying to do is we're trying to make a difference, because if we can, this is our way of, I guess creating that type of chemistry, because we are not physically touching each other, but we are even maybe more so because we're spending time, we're actually spending quality time together.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the big deal. Okay.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm really grateful that all of you have decided to spend this time with me. How much time do we have left, by the way? I don't have a clock in front of me.
We've got at least like about 15 minutes, about 15 minutes. Okay.
Well, then let me give you the last two pillars just so that you can see the introduction to the material.
Fantastic.
Yeah, the fifth pillar is rest. So after you've done all of this confidence work and fitness and connecting and discipline, when do you rest, and how much rest is necessary and how much rest is enough? From a physical standpoint, actually, if you train well, you can train no days off. So the studies, the research shows that if you, whether you work out heavy 3 days a week or you work out a little lighter 7 days a week, you actually don't need rest days, as long as you're not working for a max rep or a max weight or max distance. You can train steadily without any rest days at all. Just maintain your push to about the 85 to 90% level rather than hitting 100%, which would lay you out for a couple of days. But in order to maintain that pace, you have to sleep no nights off. And no nights off means about 7 hours for men and about 7 hours and 20 minutes a night for women on average. By the way, in the oxytocin game, somebody asked me about a gender gap before, and there is a massive gender gap in oxytocin. Women, on average, are far better at producing and consuming oxytocin in their brains than men are. So one of the big pushes for diversity in leadership and organizations is the fact that women can do this best practice with a lot better talent than men can. Physiologically and neurochemically, women have a massive advantage in the oxytocin game.
Oh, there. Amazing.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Well, actually, we have a question here from Eric that kind of fits in with your first pillar and what you're talking about right now. His question would be, what advice would you have for those that are physically challenged or those that don't have the physical abilities to perform well in your fitness pillar? Sure. What advice would you give them?
I would Google Nick Vujicic.
Oh, I think we're going to have to write that in our in our chat there. And what we'll do is that also when we're also responding tomorrow or the next day with the video. And who is this person? Go ahead.
Nick Vujicic, he's incredibly fit. Okay, he skydives, he surfs, he snowboards. He's very, very active. He also has no arms and no legs.
Now I remember who he is, yes.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that unless your ailment is worse than his, probably you're just telling yourself a story so that you can avoid the risk of doing whatever it is that you need to do, or the cost of doing whatever it is that you need to do. You're avoiding the risk and you're avoiding the cost. And those are stories that you're telling yourself, and your amygdala is rewarding you for avoiding that risk by consuming dopamine in the wrong part of your brain, the anterior insula of your brain.
Yeah, and I believe I'm just assuming if you say by cost, you're probably saying time, effort, energy.
Finance, obviously there's a missed opportunity cost, or there's an opportunity cost to exercising, right? It costs an hour that you could have spent somewhere else. So the opportunity cost is maybe television. You're not going to catch up on reruns of Grey's Anatomy if you're working out, right?
There, you've got me there. Okay.
There might be an associated financial cost. You might have to pay for equipment, or pay for a gym, or pay to access something that you didn't have access to before. Most people, you can just run outside. Running has been a best practice of humans for thousands and thousands of years. Plus, it's profitable if you're a CEO and you're a runner. So just run, you know.
Yeah. You might have to get up earlier, or whatever. And
there's also a social cost. There's a perceived social cost to getting involved in fitness, and that is you think that other people are going to be judging you, and so your amygdala doesn't want you to exile yourself from community and risk your provision and protection tribe by making a fool of yourself in front of people. So the same reason why you would avoid public speaking is the same reason why you would avoid fitness, is because you don't want to be sweaty and ugly and gross in front of people. You don't want to be judged. And that's a very human fear, right? But that's a story that you're telling yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, instead we should probably be giving a big shout out for anybody that gets themselves up off the couch that day.
Yeah. And I think both in terms of fitness and in terms of rest, I'm a big advocate for boards of directors putting fitness bracelets on their CEOs and measuring their sleep performance, because sleep performance factors in massively to productivity and performance, especially in terms of decision-making quality and input-seeking behavior. CEOs who sleep well make better decisions. And there's a connected inverse relationship between sleep and exercise. The better you sleep, the more you exercise. The better you sleep, the more you exercise. It also works exactly the same in the opposite direction. The worse you sleep, the poorer your exercise will be. Then the worse you sleep, then the poorer your exercise will be. At some point, you have to actually make the decision to reverse that trend. But CEOs who do it find benefit both in exercise and quality of sleep. And boards who measure the quality of sleep of their CEOs tend to get better performance. So there was a study of 35,000 people in terms of their sleep performance and its impact on their productivity. And that study found that people who sleep less than 6 hours a night tend to have, like, say, 1x reduction in productivity. But if you sleep a second sub 6 hour night, it's a 4x reduction in productivity. And what that translates into is a 12.1% reduction in productivity that lasts for 6 days if you have 2 sleepless nights. So anyone in any company after 2 consecutive sub 6 hour nights will lose 12.1% of their performance and productivity for the following week. Now imagine if you're paying your executives 500,000 dirhams a year, or 1 million dirhams a year. What's the cost on the bottom line of that? Never mind the missed opportunity cost of poor quality decision making. This is just strict performance reduction.
That is impressive as numbers.
Yeah, so I mean, these are, but okay, listen, you guys, what I'm telling you, these aren't secrets. These are things that I've been teaching boards of directors for like a decade already. Most of the research that I put into my book is at least 10 years old. Some of it, like the 2 different areas of dopamine, that was from last year. That's very, very recent research. But a lot of this, we've known as consultants, as executive coaches, we've known this for years. This is why you're not getting hired for that job you want, is because the guys who are hiring you already have this information, and they're making decisions about other people based on other pieces of input than just their experience and their education lines on their CVs. So if you're wondering where your lack of productivity is coming from and why you're not getting the opportunities that you should be getting because of your experience and because of your education, just know your experience and your education get you an interview, but that's it. They will not get you the job. Your character gets you the job. Your performance gets you the job. What you've done with yourself in terms of discipline and connecting and fitness, that will actually get you the job. That will differentiate you between yourself and somebody else with a similar CV. And one of the big things is sleep and rest. And there's also a way to rest while you're awake. I don't know if you know about this, but the neurochemistry or neuroeconomics of flow is a new discipline for CEOs. And this has become, the research behind this is about 15, 20 years old. A guy by the name of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, which is really, here, I'll show you the spelling of his name there is on the bottom of this slide, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. He's the godfather of flow. He realized in the late 90s that people were able to do spectacular things without being aware of what they were doing. And so if you've ever watched the interview after an Olympian breaks a record, or a football player comes off the field after winning the World Cup, then you might hear the same kind of language used. An interviewer might say, hey, how did that feel? You've lifted more than any human has ever lifted in that lift before, or you've run faster than anybody has ever run before, or you've broken your own personal record. How did that feel? And the athlete might say, it was effortless. And it's that kind of dramatic contrast between the amount of physical effort that was required for the task and the description of that physical effort as effortless that really caused Mihai to start to study this neurostate, this neurological state. And it happens in the brain between the theta and alpha states at about 8 hertz. It's a real brainwave state where you're relaxed just below watching TV, but just above the dream state, where you can slip into a state of flow and you can become incredibly productive without being aware that that's what you're doing. Now, I noticed this for myself when I was in my 20s, when I took my first master's degree. I wrote almost the entire thing from a Starbucks. And I would notice that I would sit down at 8 o'clock in the morning, buy a large venti cup of coffee, sit it next to my laptop with a stack of books on the left, and then get to researching. 8 hours would go by, sometimes 9 hours would go by, and my cup of coffee was still full. I had not gotten up. I don't feel hungry, don't feel thirsty, don't have to go to the bathroom, not aware of any of the noise of the cafe around me. I've digested 3 or 4 books already. I've written 5 or 6 pages of academic material. And then suddenly I feel a headache because I'm dehydrated and I haven't eaten anything. And that sense of that loss of time, the fact that 8 hours can go by and I don't think about it, I don't feel myself, I don't register time, it just goes by like that. And I've consumed a tremendous amount of information in that period of time. That's flow. That's a real neurological state, and you can train yourself to do it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Actually, I think in many of the universities, even in the art universities where you can go into the portrait room where portrait painters are painting, you can feel the energy in the room that people have been there for, like you say, 6-7 hours, and they're in it. They're right in that energy flow.
Yeah. So again, most of you have had this experience. You know what flow is because that's the state that you're in when you're driving without thinking. Okay. So if you've ever driven your car and parked it into your driveway and thought, oh, I don't remember driving, that was dangerous. It wasn't dangerous. It was you in flow. The thing, you were operating a 2-ton machine at breakneck speeds next to a whole bunch of other people operating 2-ton bullets at breakneck speeds. It was extremely dangerous, but your brain was so accustomed to the activities that made up that game, pushing the accelerator, pushing the brakes, signaling, moving, checking here, checking there, looking in the rearview mirror, all these little things. You've been doing them thousands and thousands of times. And so your brain moved them from the prefrontal cortex into the back gray matter of your head so it would release your prefrontal cortex from needing to be aware. And the awareness in the front of your head kind of starts to shut down in flow. So you become very conscious, but much less aware. You lose track of time and you lose track of yourself because that's where these things are stored. The other thing is that the processing power of your prefrontal cortex is very small. It's about 120 bits of information, which is 2 humans talking at the same time. If you're trying to listen to 2 people speaking at the same time, that's about as much as your prefrontal cortex can handle. But the back of your head, here, you can process billions of bits of information. You're always taking in sensory information about the noises that are in the background, the temperature of the room, how your body feels, your awareness or not awareness, the emotional decisions you're making before you're aware of them. So the prefrontal cortex, which is a very young part of the human brain, is very limited in terms of its processing power, but very, very strong in terms of will. The back part here is not very strong in terms of will, but it's extremely powerful in terms of processing. We're processing billions of bits of information all the time without even being aware of them. And the trick in getting into flow is to use activities that you've got so much practice in and provide just enough challenge to be interesting and not boring, but not enough challenge to be to be hijacking or distracting. And then in there, you can slip into processing all of that information back here, whether it's driving or doing an extreme sport, or in my case, it's research. I can do public speaking now in Flow. I've seen it, I've felt it a few times while I'm doing public speaking. I'll just slip into this state where I'm delivering a speech and thinking about something entirely different. So my awareness is over here and all of my processing is here. It's very interesting. But yeah, state of flow, you'll learn, the research says, between 450 and 490% faster. If you learn in a state of flow, you'll consume more. The US military is using it now to train their best operatives, because you can learn in 6 weeks what used to take 6 months if you can do it in a state of flow. It's
amazing.
A skill.
Well, yeah, and it's also, I think it's a skill as yourself, as a strategist, and also the way you were presenting. You have engaged us so well that the time has flown. It's unbelievable. I keep looking, this is such, it's really, we're totally engaged. We're going, we want more, we want more. And how does this rest tie in with your last pillar? What does that, how would that go? Can't leave us without the last pillar, okay?
The last, yeah, that's fine. We can leave it here if you like. And I'll
no.
I'll leave the sixth one.
Oh, no, don't leave us with a teaser.
The sixth pillar is competition. And I talk about how to curate competition and the value of competition. So one of the things that we talk about is why we act when we shouldn't act, and why we don't act when we should act. So for example, the studies of goalies in football games that dive during penalty kicks is very interesting. A goalie has a 33.5% chance of stopping the ball if they stand still, but they only stand still 6.3% of the time. And why is that? It's because of the bias toward action. It feels better to do something than to not do something. But doing something can often lead us to a mistake. And in the case of football goalies, it leads them to make more errors than they should be making, statistically speaking. So I talk about in competition, that bias toward action. But for the sake of time, I'm going to skip on to this last story, this one here. And this is really about the curating of competition. In 1997, I don't know if you remember the story or not, but in 1997, Apple Computer Corporation was 3 months away from insolvency. They spent $430 million on Next operating systems and bought back at least the temporary CEO, Steve Jobs. And so Steve Jobs moved back from Next to Apple. Apple bought the Next operating system, and Steve Jobs wanted to build networking computers. But nobody wanted networking computers, actually. People wanted something small and portable. Anyway, so during that time, in order for them to survive, they needed more cash because they had spent all of their liquid capital on buying Steve Jobs, and they needed liquidity in order to survive the next 3 months. So Steve Jobs and Fred Anderson, who was the CFO, they arranged for the sale of $150 million worth of Apple stock to Microsoft. And that kind of stunned the world. Like, why would Microsoft buy Apple? Why would Microsoft keep them in the game? There was really no incentive for Microsoft to keep them in the game. And so when they talked to Bill Gates and Steve Jobs about why that transaction took place, it wasn't, hey, it was opportunistic or I wanted control, because Bill Gates didn't buy enough of Apple to get control. He only bought enough of Apple to keep them in the game. And the reason he did that was because Microsoft was at its best when they had a strong competitor. And with Apple out of the game, there was no strong competitor left in the market. He needed Apple to survive, to compete with him, so that he would have a competitor in the market. This is also illustrated in football with Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. These two guys, they only meet each other on the field an average of 2 times a year, but they've been playing against each other for the last 15 years. They passed the Ballon d'Or between them for a decade. They're often winning the same thing. And those two guys, as the number 1 and number 2 football players in the world, are light years ahead of number 3, right? Because they've been playing their own competitive game. Even though they're not competing directly with each other, they have each other out there as competitors, and having a competitor makes you stronger. So in the case of Lionel Messi and Ronaldo, they have curated themselves as competitors. And Ronaldo would not be as strong, would not be as fast if Messi wasn't playing the game. And Messi would not be as strong and not as fast if Lionel wasn't playing the game. Or if,
so you touched the hearts of many soccer fans, or as they would say football, soccer here.
Yeah,
Fans.
so both in football and in business, you have to curate your competitors. Choose who your competitors are, whether they know it or not. Use them to strengthen you. You are as strong as the people you train against. So train against, or work against, or profit against a really good, chosen, curated competitor.
So yeah, something that you can mirror and step up your game with, maybe.
Exactly right.
Yeah, in some cases mirror, in some places I guess surpass, which is what you want to do. So I like the way you put a twist on competition, because it's very positive. It's a very positive look of competition, not as something as negative. Yeah. Oh,
I got strong by competing against people that were stronger than me, both in academics and physically and in business. That's how I get strong. I choose competitors, whether they know they're my competitors or not. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I don't care if they know. I choose them and I benchmark against them and I compete. And when I beat them, then I have to find another stronger competitor. And in the case of the football players, or in the case of Apple and Microsoft had to keep Apple alive, because if Apple died, then Microsoft would not perform at its best.
Yeah, and it is all about performing at your best in whatever the situation holds, so these are amazing pillars, and so we're so looking forward for your book to come out. I'm certain we might have to have a book signing virtually. Who knows? Let's hope physically by that time, but virtually for sure. And we were kind of wondering, we've had so many positive comments and things like that. We might have to work maybe hopefully on having, without a doubt, another lovely webinar, but maybe we should work actually on a workshop. We could do a workshop session if you can. And I don't know what else to say about this, but it is actually, you really do make it sound so easy. It must be all your years of experience.
No, I just follow the science. I'm a scientist at heart. So, and remember, if you treat yourself as a human and you recognize what being human actually is, you'll find it much easier. We are beautiful collections of experiences, and those experiences are governed by physiology and chemistry. And if we know how to hack our physiology and we know how to hack our chemistry, then we will produce the kind of behavior that we know we're capable of.
Well, thank you. You really do make it sound so easy. So I'm really looking for the next one on this, because I think, thank you so much, first of all, every one of you. Thank you so much for taking the time out today. We will be uploading this very soon as the time permits on our YouTube channel. So remember to like us and love us. You will give you, if Corrie would be so kind, we will be also giving you all the links towards Corrie so that you can actually contact him, like and love him, as well as Instagram, okay? We'll take this time, we network it forward by having such amazing speakers as yourself. So Dr. Corrie Block, thank you for your experience, and thank you for your very human experience, because it's so lovely to know. I'm trying not to be modest for you, but you have made some major personal achievements, and thank you to make us know that it's never ever too late to make some major achievements as well. You've got so many thank yous popping up here. So great webinar. Thank you for sharing your inspired words of wisdom. Thanks a lot. And so they're sharing your experience and knowledge. It's very appreciated. So, and thank you too for all our participants. On, it's hard to be in the background, but I'm very honest. You have made the time fly, and I'm so happy that you stayed longer and you're with us. And so we're looking forward to see you soon. Okay. Thanks, Heba. Thanks, Sangeeta. You guys in the background. Okay. Ciao. Bye bye. Have a really good day. Stay safe. Bye. And Ramadan Kareem. And stay safe, everyone. Take care. Ciao. Bye bye.
Bye.